Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, to today's quick live stream where we will briefly go through the pros and cons of remote working. Here I have my good friend, fellow Men of Now admin, and actual roommate, Joel, joining me for the stream to talk about this titillating topic. How you doing today, Joel?
Good. Titillated, man. Thanks for inviting me
Yep,
on.
super tits elated. So for this stream, I'll go ahead and just kick it off by asking you, what's been your experience with remote work? Kind of give us a brief rundown. Walk us through your resume.
Ooh, it's gonna get juicy. Yeah. So for me, it started pretty much probably like 2018. So I was going back to university and I decided to start instead of working in the corporate world. So I was working at Target, Whole Foods. My career was not established yet, as you can tell. I decided to do kind of delivery gigs. So Instacart, um, Eat Street, that kind of thing, Amazon, so delivery as well. And although it's not technically remote, what it did is it allowed me to start creating my own schedule for myself. And I had to learn how to be responsible for showing up for work. And why I say showing up for work, well, with those jobs, you basically get to sign on anytime and just start working. So it's very easy to say, I'm just going to watch TV today. And
Yep.
that's really where it began for me and realizing I don't like working for another person.
Yeah, and then guys, by the way, as you're starting to file in here, feel free to leave any comments, questions down below in the chat there. If you want to pop on up for a bit, you can certainly do that. This will actually be leading into a call in our private group, so we'll give you more details on that as we are wrapping up again this quick stream. So the remote working thing, I think for me, it's fantastic. Joel and I both live in Mexico City, so when you do the remote lifestyle or the living abroad lifestyle, it makes sense logically that you should probably have a remote source of income. Although a lot of people mess that up. They come down here and don't have any money in the bank or money actively coming in, and that can cause issues for sure. So, Joel, I know that you've told a cautionary tale about other abroad stints. Maybe go ahead and share that with the folks as I get the invite link here for people to jump up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did exactly what Jaren just said not to do. So I came to Poland earlier last year and I had a job set up that was going to be remote, but it fell through pretty quick. And so I was stuck without income. And I had a good amount in the bank. So I was able to kind of sift off that for a while. But yeah, I still didn't realize that you need to have income coming in to survive. And I was like, I always had the mindset, Jaren, let me know if you've ever thought the same, where it's like, universe is just going to give me money because it loves me.
Yep.
It kind of does that, but only if you're working for it. So coming down to Mexico, well, let's just say I learned my lesson after about a month because I started spending a little bit, compulsively, even coming down here. I'm like,
That first month was fun though,
it
ordering
was so
sushi and going out every night,
fun.
fogo de chao at least once a week, and
Totally.
then you run your budget and realize, oh, I've overshot a little bit.
Yep. I might have to go back to the US if I don't double down. So thankfully things started to pick up and now I work completely remote. So I make all my money online through different avenues, whether it be the sporadic coaching or video edits. So of the video edits you see on the Men of Now channel, I get to the opportunities to do that. And it gives me some income every month. Jaren's vids as well. I get to do some work on those. And it's been a privilege, my friend. And I've learned a lot. And it's also the most important part is it's allowed me to stay here and live with you and just kick it and have a great time in Mexico.
So starting from the top, do we want to dive into the pros and the cons? Maybe start with the positive and then paint the negative, or?
Yeah, I think we do that.
All right,
So
cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and get Josh up here too. There we go. We got the three amigos now. How you doing, Renegade?
Spectacular, my friend. How are you?
Fantastic as well. So I'm sure you saw us leading into this topic. So we're going to go into just real quick the pros and cons of working abroad. So I'll kick it to you guys. What are the pros so far that you've seen in your remote experience? And then Joel, maybe let's let Josh kind of give a brief intro to your experience in remote working.
sure thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked remote for the last 17 years now, so I may know a few things about it.
You're an OG, yeah.
Yeah. So again, yeah, before like anyone, before 2020 and anybody knew what like remote work really was. So like, I definitely say like one of the more hilarious cons is that all your friends treat you as if you don't work because they think you're just watching cartoons and eating Captain Crunch all day. So that was really
Right.
entertaining until 2020 rolled around. And everyone's like, oh, we see the light. Like, okay, we get it. Yeah, you can watch cartoons, but you can also get your work done. So yeah, I've had some pretty interesting experiences with it, but I'll definitely say a huge pro is for sure the flexibility, where I've done stints where I've lived in different cities for a month, or a couple weeks at a time, just to try them out, see what they're like, visit friends, whatnot, while still, not having to take time off work, because again, I got the freedom and flexibility. As long as there's an internet connection, I can get whatever it is that's essential done and be able to still enjoy my time somewhere else.
Oh, that's
Yeah, and that's
awesome.
leading a lot of digital nomads to go abroad or even relocate within their home countries. So I know down here where we live in Mexico City, there's a large abroad presence or expat, digital nomad, backpacker, traveler, whatever term you want to use for that class of people presence. And I don't see that slowing down anytime soon, although some companies are starting to push back on it. Josh, you and I have talked about that offline, about kind of how to overcome that, since I derive my income 100% remotely too. But I'm curious on how both of you guys structured your remote life. So I was always a corporate guy, full-time job, W-2. There's a stint a couple of years ago where I was able to do a couple of contract 1099 freelancing type gigs. And that actually worked really well for me. I managed my day or my profession almost as if I was a sole prop marketing agency owner. So as Joel mentioned, you got to really get your accountability down, your time management down, learn how to shuffle things well, and then also find time for yourself. I know that people think, like Josh, you mentioned, you can just sit around and watch cartoons and kind of screw off all day. But I found with remote work that actually a lot of times I end up working more. And I think companies are starting to discover this too.
Yeah. Well, for me, I was growing up, I was a do chores last, play first kind of guy. So I would always say, I'm going to hang out with my buddies first and then do my work. And it always bit me in the ass because around like 7 p.m., my parents were like, all right, come home and, you got to get some stuff done. So I structured around, okay, first thing I'm going to do is get everything I can done so then I can go and enjoy the day and be spontaneous. And that's what I really like about remote work, is that I have that personality type, obviously coming from addiction, where I kind of just like to
All
go
or
off
nothing.
all all or nothing, yep,
Yeah.
and then going off whims. So kind of just flowing with the wind. I appreciate structure, and I definitely have structure, but if I had to snap my fingers and choose one or the other, I would choose to just be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want. So that's kind of the approach I take, is like, I want to structure it so I can do what I want when I want. However, I am going to be disciplined. We come back to that word. It's a very important word, discipline, in getting the things done, because at the end of the day, even though I'm working remote, I am still being of service to another person. So I am still technically working for another human being. And in that sense, it's very important that I show up and do the work. So, and I know, Josh, you've talked about this a lot too, in that discipline. So, I mean, for yourself, over 17 years, what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, you have to find a good balance of discipline that really works for yourself, because one of the, as you mentioned, Jaren, right? One of the traps you can easily fall into is you can just kind of get into a great flow and then you wind up like really overworking yourself. So, right, there can be psychological ramifications where it's like, hey, if you're working from home constantly, suddenly when you're at home, you're like restless, right? So,
Mhm.
sometimes for some people, it's like, hey, I just need to be in a different space where I go to a coffee shop and I can work there, or I spend 1 or 2 days a week where I go to a co-working space, get work there. So there's that psychological separation of like, hey, home is where I like rest. Out there is where I work or where I do work. That's where oftentimes a lot of people that have, remote working situations, they have like an office in their house, right? Which is, this is my dedicated working space, because you can blur your lines psychologically pretty quickly. So you can, turn your house into more of like a unnecessary stressful environment. And then another thing that you also want to be more careful and cognizant of is, as well as making sure that even though you do have like a lot of flexibility, you don't abuse that flexibility to the point where, again, whoever you're working for or your clients, right, it starts to suffer or starts to impact there, right? So for example, right, you're working remote, it's great. Suddenly, hey, it's a really great day outside. It might be really nice to
It
like
is.
go up to the beach and hang out and just chill and relax on the sand. Well, that's all great and fine. But, if you decide that you're going to, be completely disappearing and vanishing, right? And then you're on the beach and then you come back and you have like 3 missed calls because, there was an emergency or something came up and people were trying to find you, then that's where, again, you can work yourself into a really interesting situation, right? So you want to make sure that you do have that proper communication channels established where it's like, hey, whoever it is you're working with or whatnot, it's like, hey, I'm taking the next 4 hours where I'm going to be, unavailable. So if something emergency does pop up, here's the call me directly on my cell, I'll answer it. But again, just making sure that, you give the proper communication channels, because oftentimes it does feel a lot like, oh, I'm up, I'm working, I can do whatever. Okay, great. I'm just going to shut the laptop down and just go zone out for the next 5 hours. Well, there are still people that will depend and will rely on you. So, making sure that you maintain discipline around effective communication with your team. That's a real easy thing that people can overlook in the beginning stages of just trying to get used to remote work.
I've noticed the line of communication is a huge one. So I'm interviewing with new companies / potential clients, depending upon how I want to structure my work mix moving forward. And a lot of them ask you about that in terms of what does your remote experience look like? And I think it hits back to those points. Like, okay, you do have the liberty, you do have the flexibility, but are you able to effectively balance that? Have you done that successfully? And do you know how to continue doing that moving into the future? And a question that I always ask them on the initial calls is, is there an expectation around the line of communication, and what does that look like? So I like jobs to where, okay, we do maybe a weekly or bi-weekly sprint. We do have a regular recurring meeting to where we do a sprint review. Maybe we do daily stand-ups, although sometimes I don't like daily stand-ups. You can just do that on Slack in a group type message. And then as long as everyone's hitting their milestones, then we're good. I've found that in my career, I've managed my most successful teams under that structure. But a lot of companies, they don't quite work that way. There are still a lot of, okay, hey, we're a 9 to 5 typical corporation. Yes, okay, the stream's distributed, or the team is distributed, we work remotely, but they do expect you to almost work from a micromanage standpoint, for lack of a better term. That old school mindset, if we don't see you doing something, then how do we know you're really working? And I always retort back to that, like, well, I'm wildly creative. So sometimes I get a stroke of genius at 3 a.m. and I wake up and fire up the laptop, and then I'm good to go. And Josh, I liked your suggestion too, in terms of having a dedicated workspace and a dedicated rest space or fun space or what have you. I have a work office right here, but I've noticed these last few weeks that, well, the sun comes in all day here, so it gets really hot on this side of the house. So I'll go to my room, which is on the shaded side of the building, pop my laptop up, and sometimes just sit there and work away too, sitting on my bed. But that is tough in terms when it's time to sleep, to where you have to start making that mental disconnect between, okay, work brain's off, rest brain is on. So it really depends on what your habits are, what your schedule, what your structure looks like for you. And then maybe, guys, if you want to dig in a bit, how does that look for you? How do you find that you worked best effectively when working remotely?
I actually find I work best right there in that bed. So
I do
like
pretty
that.
well too, just sitting on the bed.
It's so nice, man. Like, I don't have to wear clothes. I can just do all my work. I don't have to move. That's what I like. So I find that a huge pro for myself. I like Josh's structured mindset, and I think you two work more in the corporate world. So I think you need to be a little more, intentional with all that stuff. For me,
You'll notice for my calls, I'm in front of this wall. Like, I don't want them to see the headboard on the calls.
And like, you like this. What's up, guys?
Yeah,
that's my face when I'm working. So that's a huge pro for me, is just getting to work whenever. And like, to your point, Josh, like, I always have my phone on me. Like, if I'm at the gym, I'm like responding to messages, talking to you guys in the group chat, or even today when I was walking to the gym, I updated the thumbnail for the on our Instagram page. So I really like that tip. I think that's a great tip, guys. Is if you're working remote, you got to have that structure around when you can put your phone down or when you have to be on call all the time. So you could look at that as a pro or con, that you have to be on call at all times, basically. So that's why I find, like, I got to find a fun job where it's worth it to be on call at all times, because I'm just talking to the boys.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing too is just creating like kind of a dedicated like work windows for yourself as well too, where again, sometimes people are like, oh, you're remote, I'm going to send you something at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then you start like answering it, right? It's like, no, have your dedicated kind of work windows and working hours. So, that way it's one for your own mental sanity, organization, and structure. You aren't throwing off your circadian rhythm by completely just like answering things whenever, wherever, as they come in. But then also too, it's good for developing kind of a bit more of that, routine for yourself as well. Where again, it's like, hey, here's kind of like my structured timetables, so that way, your days don't get away from you or like run away from you, because it is real easy to just kind of like nose to the grindstone, and next thing you know, it's like, man, it's been like 10 hours have gone by. I'm just going to completely like hammering and going at it. Didn't even realize it. And then like, here I am now. So, it's important to, again, keep that sort of structure for yourself, but also too, the real reason why that structure is really important is that, again, as you're dealing and working with a lot of different clients, right, or whoever, it's important that there is that right dependability aspect of it. Because again, if you're a remote worker, that's an extremely high degree of trust. And all it takes is one incident for that trust to be completely violated. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, sorry, like, we either got to like try to micromanage you to make sure you're doing what it is that you're saying that you're doing, or, we just are going to have to part our different ways. Because again, like, being able to say, hey, we trust that you're going to get this done in the time frame you say you're going to get it done, and we're not going to necessarily see you or be looking over your shoulder. There is a huge and very, very large degree of trust. So again, being able to show consistency, that's what really helps build and instill a lot of trust in, whoever it is you have to be working for, your clientele. So that's another, tip from having worked so long remotely, is that, you've got to build that consistency in there, just so that way, again, people that are working with you, right, they don't think that, this guy's just off at the bar at like, 2:00 in the morning, or, 3:00 in the afternoon, hitting up his local happy hour, which, hey, you very well may be, right? Could be. There's a perk. You can enjoy that. But again, as they say, right, with great power comes great responsibility. So make sure you exercise that, power responsibly, because it is really easy to get lost in the sauce, for lack of a better term. It's a high degree of freedom. And so, not everyone can handle it.
And I think it is tough if you're newer to the remote working type culture, which is oftentimes why people want to know what your experience looks like there. So I know that I've traveled quite a bit too, doing the remote working thing. I've hung out with other digital nomads, and I know guys that will go to the bar and they'll pull up in their laptop and they'll sip on double IPAs while they're working, or there'll be ambient lounge music in the background. Or I worked in El Salvador for a bit with an investor from a previous job, and we rented a place at the beach, brought the employees to the beach, worked under a little palapa, had the owner run a large Ethernet cable out there and put it into a wired in hub. And we worked from the beach in El Salvador. And for my buddy, that was effective. He really liked that. He's like, oh, hey, surf's up, go grab a board and then go rip a wave or two and then come back and sit down. Whereas for me, I've always been the type, more of the structured brain, to where I'm a traditional ADHD type guy, to where I used to think that I was good at multitasking, but really I'm kind of OCD too. So I track a lot of things. I realized that in terms of my productivity, I'm better if I don't do as much task switching. So Joel saw me today. I booked a bunch of calls back to back to back. So it's off one onto the other, but I'm in conversing mode. I'm in selling mode. I'm in whatever mode. Then maybe I go to the gym midday. I come and I'll block out on my calendar too, Josh, put like a hour, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is hours. That is deep focused work. And I found that when I get on board with new clients, or if I'm working a full-time job at the new company remotely, that the key is to set that expectation from the get-go. And often in the initial conversation phases, in the negotiation phase, you will come to agreement on those terms. When I talk to any sort of corporate headhunters or recruiters, I ask them, what does that line of communication look like? What does the expectation look like? The other members on the team, who's going to be reporting to me? Who will I need to interact with? What's their expectation? Are there overlap hours? What does their communication cadence look like? So you iron all that out on the front end, so you don't have any of these surprises. Because again, if you put yourself in their shoes, it is tough in terms of, hey, we're giving you this money and we don't trust you yet. You're brand new. You're a face that we see connected an avatar online, or maybe if we get on a webcam, we'll see you. But a lot of companies don't do a lot of those impromptu type meetings anymore. It's all via Slack, and then not even really email anymore. I think email's kind of just to follow up or have an insight into more formal communication. For me, it's like bullet points. Hey, here's what we did this week. Here's what we're doing next week. Hey, here's a report. Make sure whatever. But there's modern communication tools too. So it is really important to establish that line of communication and then what that expectation looks like. And then also make sure that you do it for yourself. Like you said, I've worked in periods of my career where the CEO calls me at 3 a.m. because I'm on the West Coast, he's on the East Coast, and and he had some harebrained idea, and hey, when did you get on it now? And then I used to take those calls, and I used to always wonder, okay, why am I overworked? Why are other guys able to come and go into the office as they please, take extended lunches, get invited on cool trips or conferences, but I'm just getting, the more I say yes, the more I'm getting bogged down with work. So it's about having, I think, those boundaries and those expectations clearly set on both sides. So for both of you guys, I'll pose the question, and going back to the guys. Joel, I know you like to go out and work sometimes too. Usually I like to just be in the house, like, okay, I'm in work mode, I'm going to get everything done, and then I'm going to close my laptop and then disconnect and go analog. What's been you guys' experience with that, and how have you managed that balance?
Oof. Yeah, great question, Jaren. I think a lot of it depends for me on like what my social circle and network is looking like at that moment. When I'm dating, when I'm seeing friends regularly, it's easy to do that because I'm like, okay, I want to get my work done to get to hang out with these people or go on a date or whatever. I find that when I'm maybe in a bit of a slump, like dating or something, I'm kind of working all day because there's just not
You
much
double
else
down.
to do. Double down, yep. And doing YouTube and stuff too. Like if you guys have ever seen some of my vids, I'm often outside or at a park or something. So I like to film like in nature, just a little more interesting than like a wall, like every single time. So I'm kind of trying to find ways that I can
Josh
get
and I
creative.
laughing, same background every time.
Josh's amazing house. I see you have a roommate too, because I was on a stream recently and someone had the exact same house as you. So
The same architect.
Right?
Same architect. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice.
Those
No,
cookie
it's
cutter
a
houses they build in
background.
SoCal.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I like to structure it around my like dating and stuff, and yeah, it's kind of what it is for me.
I mean, for me, it all, it comes down to what's going to be the most, again, lucrative way in which I can optimize things, right? So, you want to make sure that you have that structure. But for a lot of people, right, it's like, hey, I don't have a 9 to 5, but I typically keep hours between 9 and 5 because that's when most emails or communications or lines or I have to be available already or whatnot, right, to tackle things. So it's more about the convenience of, being lucrative because again, I do have my set like, hey, after 5, I tend not to exist. But if this is something that, hey, it's a deal sliding through and the client's, in a time zone behind me or in some other crazy time zone, yeah, I'm definitely going to take it. So for me, what I really love about the flexibility of working remote is that you can really maximize your lucrative efficiency. And I'm not going to give away my secrets on that here on this stream. Like when we go into the kickback, I'll detail a lot more into like how to really optimize remote work to like overdrive your income for yourself. But that being said, when you are flexible like that, you really do have a lot of unique windows and opportunity to really, really maximize the how lucrative your time can be. And that's something that, you don't necessarily won't have figured out when you first getting started. But once you get a good like working groove for yourself figured out, then you'll really be like, okay, these are like my real prime, like lucrative windows. Let me really double down and capitalize on that. So that's where, again, I won't give away the secret sauce like here. That's something you guys got to, for the members, I'll divulge into that in a lot more elaborate detail. But we'll definitely say that, a huge advantage of working remote is that you have some unique opportunities to really maximize your time in a much more lucrative fashion than you would working non-remote.
And I've noticed a theme emerging here in this conversation to where we started with the pros, that a lot of the pros can also technically be cons. So you do have to hold yourself accountable. You do have to be mindful of communication, the expectations of your clients and or companies or other colleagues. And you really have to, it sounds like it's a self-discovery phase. You really have to get to know yourself and understand how you work best and how that fits in with the other people who may depend upon you. So let's maybe transition a bit more into the, if there's any, I think we might see this theme continue to where there's a bit of overlap. There's a bit of good and bad with everything. And most of us operate, I think, naturally knowing you guys in the gray rather than white or black. Well, Joel, you're an addict. You're white or black thinker, but
I'm in gray today, guys. Look at gray background.
But Josh and I always say, like, I live in the gray. I think, Josh, I've heard you say that too. But guys, like, what are just some outright cons of working abroad, or things that maybe started as a con that you had to learn to overcome and maybe translate it into a positive or a pro?
Yeah, I think a big one is the uncertainty. Like you don't know when income is coming in at times. You really have to kind of learn how to manage your own emotions around work and money and be very financially disciplined with what you have. So at the moment when I was learning that, that was a con because I was not good at it. So I'm like, fuck, like this sucks. I kind of wish I had that security. But at the same time, I knew I never could go back to that, to working for a boss, to showing up to work every day. Like it was just going to kill me. So I had to basically just suck it up and learn how to manage that anxiety. And I knew that if I kept going and kept pushing forward, that I was going to get to where I want to be. So to your point, Jaren, so something I got to work on too is taking pauses before I start a new sentence. So pause. To your point, with cons, every con has turned into a pro. So I want to put that as a caveat. Like each time that I've thought, okay, this is gonna be brutal, like I'm not gonna get through this, it's always come out to be something better. One pro I do want to say that we didn't talk about before we transition more into the cons that are technically pros is that there's no commute. That is the best time, because man, dude, like I heard stories like, Jaren, you told me you were in California and you'd have to drive an hour each way every single day. That's brutal.
Well, at my first job, I worked on a military site in southeastern Washington state. So it was an hour and a half each way, but that was an actual drive. But I have had commutes up to an hour, to where it's not far distance wise, but traffic is just so bad because there's such high volume in those peak hours that you're essentially just stuck in a parking lot every day, twice a day. Whereas some of those longer drives where there wasn't a lot of traffic, I actually don't mind driving. Or I don't mind driving. I like driving if the car is moving. If you're stuck in what's essentially a parking lot that has an I and then maybe a 5 after it, that sucks.
But the real thing is that it's, it eats your time, right? Because you have to wake up an hour before, get ready, get prepped, then be on the road for an hour. So by the time you get there, you got to get settled in and everything. So really, you're looking at like a 2.5 hours that's just lost on the way there.
Yes.
Then on the way back, right? You drive, you come back, finally you get home, you want to decompress, you want to rest a little bit. So again, you lose, a good 5 hours, roughly 5 to 6 hours with that, having a commute there, which you get back, right? Being able to work remote. Definitely will say though, and I think it's going more to your point too, Joel. It's, I think, important to differentiate where working remote, there's 2 routes you can go, right? There's working remote like as an entrepreneur, and then there's working remote like as an employee, right? Because as an employee working remote, it's great because you got, hey, consistent income is coming in. I'm doing my regular job and my routine. Life is good. I got my regular cadences and whatnot. So some of those pressures, in the work, like the remote working space, you won't necessarily feel because you've got all of that locked in by the nature of the job. Now, that being said, right, you still have a boss, this is someone you have to answer to, versus being an entrepreneur. Then it's like, okay, that's where those pros and cons sort of, get amplified, right, or magnified, and the voices in your head suddenly start talking a lot louder when it's just you by yourself. But, I would definitely say a massive con of working from home is going to be that, person right next to you sort of interaction. So like when, again, you're in a more working environment, right, like around an office or something like that, you get a lot more of that personal day-to-day, just like, hey, I have an immediate question. Hey, Terry's right there. Let me go ask him, right?
Yeah.
So you get a lot of that done. So sometimes, the communication delay can be very prevalent, especially with things that are very time sensitive. So that's where working remote can definitely be something that can be a very big con of it, is that you get that time delay built in there, especially when you got like a deadline or something that, again, is very, very time sensitive. So that communication really, really becomes very critical and very, very important. And nothing is worse than when you've got like, something going live, right? Or you've got a deadline that's rapidly approaching and you can't get a hold of anybody because they're either tied up on other meetings or other stuff, and you physically aren't there to be able to go and say, hey, can you help me out with this, right, really quick. So that is definitely, I would say, like one of the bigger drawbacks of working remote.
I remember when I started getting my commute back, how liberating that feeling was. Although I do enjoy driving. So this comment right here, great stream, cabin fever is a real thing. That is true. Where I live now, I don't even have a car anymore. I am an American. I come from car culture. I do enjoy driving. I'd prefer not to do it for a commute, but there were times where I'd actually look forward to that. And what I'm getting into, which I think could be a con in a lot of cases, is with that commute, you had a clear start time and stop time. You had a clear, okay, I'm out of bed at this time. Here's my morning sequence. I'm getting ready. I'm in the car by this time. I'll arrive to the office by this time. I check in and say hi to my coworkers, and everything's a lot more structured. And I think as an effect of a lot of the workforce going 100% remote, or at least a hybrid type model, is people work from all over the world. So you have asynchronous communication across multiple time zones. So for me, I've noticed that as much as I like to say, okay, at this time I'm doing this, at that time I'm doing that, getting the 4 to 5 hours, whatever it is, back from your commute. Okay, well, now I can go to the gym in the middle of the day. I take singing classes twice a week. I do live streams whenever I can. So I do get that time back for myself. But I've noticed that sometimes there's a bit of a gray area in terms of when that start time and stop time is. Like, okay, hey, it's 5 p.m. on whatever time zone I'm working on. So maybe it's 7 or 8 p.m. for me if I'm ahead, or if I'm traveling, that might be a bit off. But there's people that work in India and Pakistan and London and Tokyo that are also on my team. So how do you balance all these different schedules across all the different time zones? And if you don't do it carefully, you can find very quickly that you're actually working a lot more hours wise. It can even exceed that time you got back, in the sense that, okay, you're never truly offline.
Josh, you can go ahead and touch on that, because you've done a lot of international business.
Yes, indeed. Where, you're dealing with people in like 9-hour difference in time. So you're just like, oh, okay, great. Yes, I will take this call at 5 a.m. because, by the time I'm waking up, they're all clocking out. And so it's going to be, much too late. So sometimes depending on where you're at, right, you do have to adjust your hours. And really what it kind of comes down to is, again, it really comes down to how disciplined you are and how well you can manage your time. Because if you're really bad at time management, working remote is definitely not going to be for you, because again, things are going to slip through the cracks. And you also are going to find yourself in a situation where, things continuously pile up. So now you're like constantly having to play a lot more catch up. So that's the other thing where, again, which is just kind of a pro, but also like really kind of like a con of working remote, is that, if it all like blows up and goes south, really you have no one to blame but you, right? It's like, hey, I can't blame this was held up by somebody else or blah, blah, blah. It's like, hey, I did not manage my time effectively. And so, for a lot of people, you really have to ask the question of like, because I know a lot of people, they tried working remote, especially in 2020. It just drove them crazy because they just didn't like it. And it depends on your working environment, right? Because sometimes, right, if you've, got kids at home and whatnot, and like they're running around, like screaming and, drawing all of the walls and everything like that, it's like, hey, being able to go to the office to actually get done, like get work productive, it's nice to get a little bit of a break from that, so that you can come back and be like, okay, now I'm in this mode, I can handle it. So, it really does. And that's what I kind of talked about earlier, is just, making sure you keep those psychological barriers and psychological lines like really firm, because you can really blur those lines real easy and real quickly when you're working remote.
Like not wearing pants on group calls. I hear people talk about that, Joel. You'll see me. So I have a rule. If I'm doing like an all hands meeting or a sales marketing update or whatever, I'll actually still dress up for my calls, because that does do something to me psychologically. That's something I've noticed I miss from the office, to where, okay, I have my work clothes planned out for the week, and I wake up and I shower and I do my hygiene, I get in the car, and then like there's that slow transition period mentally into, okay, I'm physically leaving the house, commuting, and that's allowing me to get into the mental mindset of I am in work mode now. I'm wearing, whatever, maybe business casual. I've worked in fintech where you wear suit and ties on certain occasions. Sometimes if it's a traditional finance company, suit and tie every day. If you're client facing, what have you. But I know sometimes like, oh, well, I'm just doing admin stuff today, I can just lay in bed with my shirt off and boxers. But I know for me mentally, I still need to, as you mentioned, Josh, create that delineation between work mode and personal mode in my own mind.
Yeah, because what winds up happening is that when you don't do that, they start to bleed into each other. So like in your personal life, right, you start answering calls or like, trying to do stuff. But the inverse is also true, which a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, where you bring more of that lackadaisical, casual, personal side of yourself into your professional working environment. So that is a really huge con to be wary of, is that if you don't keep those things straight, suddenly you're going to find that, your clients or your employers or whatever, they start getting like real pissed off at you because like, they hired you to be a professional, right, to do a job, and your lines are blurred. So now you're bleeding over your more personal side into your professional working environment. And for some places that can kind of work and be okay. But, it can definitely have an impact on how people perceive you, as well as, degrade your working relationships. So you've got to make sure that, you kind of keep those things very, very distinct and kind of very, very separate, because a lot of times people that, again, work remote, don't get taken as serious, just because they, again, have more of that continuous blending between the two. So a lot of the personal side bleeds into the professional side. And, everybody, they want a professional, right? Hey, you're a hitman, you come up, here's your job, here's what you do. Great, go for it. We're going to let you loose. We have our trust, faith, and confidence in you. But if you start bleeding into that with more of your, more casual personality, then that can definitely be a bit of a hindrance.
Okay. It was pretty funny. I walked into the living room yesterday and Jaren was in a pink shirt and then like gym shorts, like a button-up shirt. I was like,
flip-flops.
Yeah. I do want to make a point here, and Josh, something you were saying. We have another guest that's going to hop on here in a sec, but about the time management. And I see a lot of people like through recovery that try to get into like business and stuff, and they just can't do it. So I spent a lot of time in like work addiction groups. And so that's what stood out to me when you said that, like that kind of not knowing when to turn off work and then go back into like regular life. So that is a huge thing. And I spent a few years in that group in the recovery space. And it really helped me just see that like, yeah, like work's great and it's awesome and can be really rewarding, but don't let it consume you, because people come in to those groups that are like 50, 60, 70 years old, and they just have no idea who they are because they spent so much of their life just chasing work.
Yeah, or you can.
I've fallen into that in my career too.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got that ADHD brain to like, okay, I need to do more, and then kind of some of that anxiety too. Can lead to that, but I've definitely fallen into that too, and that's why I posed a couple of questions in terms of like, okay, well, how do you balance your time? Or I'll bring our next member up. Looks like remote working bro on vacation, which is funny because when I first started working remote, a lot of guys I know do exactly that. They'll literally sit there with the beach behind them. Joel, there's a guy in town this last week, and we went out every night this week. And I showed up to his place, I think Fridays when he got in, and he was sitting there just, drinking, having a little green stuff. But he was on calls back and forth and clicking stuff out and still trying to shut down while, like Josh said, you blur those two parts of your life. For me, I like to delineate, like I'm in social mode now. I'm in live stream mode. I'm in work mode. I'm on sales call mode. I'm in admin mode, answer email mode. And I try not to blur those. So how's remote working going for you? Spring break up there in Philly?
Oh, dude, it's absolutely fantastic. Actually, I'm in your neck of the woods. I'm down in Cancun right now, and I'm having a great time. Dude, my Forex business is going nuts. My crypto business is going nuts. I'm just killing it. And, dude, all I do is just sit around, drink White Claws, and just make money. I make this magic internet money, and it's amazing, man. Remote working is the way to go.
Exactly. We just you started out drop shipping, and look at you now.
Yeah, I know, man. That drop shipping, that was something. But at least I made my first couple million there, and then I just moved on to bigger, better things.
I've always been envious of guys like that. I've never been able to do that. And it's funny, you do meet those guys every now and then. Or have you guys met these people even in the traditional workforce to where you'll see them, you see the lifestyle, and you're like, how do you do that? Because I always see you kind of screwing off. Is like, do you just get paid to not do anything, or how is that? How do you find those gigs?
Dude, that is so interesting. Because that's kind of how I live my life. Like, it's remote work, and then I have multiple businesses as well. And what I do is I just kind of like compartmentalize what I'm doing. So I'm making sure I'm giving the full time to the company. I'm giving the full time to the people that are working for me. And I just kind of break things up in segments. Sometimes for me, a 30-minute break during the day of like regular work is me just doing the regular work with my own businesses and talking to my employees, just to kind of like give that little, the same way that you would with a traditional office environment where you would go walk to somebody else's cubicle and then chit chat for a little bit. It's the same type of thing. It's just how you segment it. And I really think that organization is key. I think Josh may have been saying something about it a little bit before, or maybe it was you, Jaren, like making sure that, all right, now I have all this time, but I still have to put in the same amount of effort. And so it's all about balancing that and making sure that you're not goofing off. You're actually getting done the different things that you need to do.
So I have here, what is magic internet money? In my world, if you don't work, you don't eat. Yeah, I think that's kind of tongue in cheek. But I do come across those people. They come through town. Hey, I'm in Mexico City for a week. Let's meet up. And it seems like they're always out doing something. I was like, when are you actually working? Because it seems to me, again, I have the opposite problem to where I have to mentally be like, you know what? Now it's time to go out and socialize. Now it's time to go for a walk. Now it's time to go to the gym. And still, like Joel, that phone's on you and you get so many notifications. And a lot of times you see them come through. You're like, okay, I need some me time. For me, a lot of times later at night, I'll go in my room, I'll close the door, lock myself in there, and play guitar for an hour. And that's just me mentally disconnecting. Otherwise, I won't sleep because I've got a brain that if you leave it on, it'll just keep going.
Yeah, there's just again to show you the power of possibility there. I know a couple of people that have pretty much every aspect of their life is sponsored. And like we're talking like actual professional like companies are sponsoring them to go out and be like representative of like lifestyle. So there are some
I'm trying to do that now. How do I blur those lines to make money?
Positions in there where again it's like, oh, they want to fly somewhere. Yeah, the airline's got it covered. Oh, they want to be in a hotel. Oh, the hotel's it's already got them covered. So there's very interesting and unique positions out there, very few and far between. And there's a certain degree of like networking and personal relationships you really have to develop in order to curate that for yourself. But there are some that pretend to do it and they can do it short term, but they get burned out really quick. But there's some that if you really master it, which I'm actually kind of envious of sometimes, I'm like, you really mastered this. You cracked it.
I am too. So, I can't even go to the coffee shop. Hear the behind you, sirens going by, and it just pulls me out of the zone. Here, I've got one more question, then we will kick this into our private group, guys. So since the lines have been blurred, I do feel like I've had to either work more or just be available for longer hours. I definitely feel like that too at times. We've hit on that a couple times. For guys, anyone watching here live, so what we're going to do with these shows, I'm going to be doing these weekly, syncing them across multiple channels. If you come into my channel, Joel's channel, whoever's up on the panel, and then the Men of Now channel, this is going to lead into our weekly kickback call on the Men of Now. If you're not sure what Men of Now is, well, that is a group of guys where all four of us here are members of Men of Now. Get in there. It's $75 per month. It is a private men's self-development and just learning to level up in general in all areas of love and life by building lives worth living and loving. Click down there. You can sign into the community. It is at time of publishing this $75 per month, but you get a lot of cool benefits. You get access to a bunch of free bonuses that all of the members and the admins up here on this panel have put out there. Whether it's courses, ebooks, checklists, downloads, what have you, you get access to all of us rather than just one coach for any area of your life. You have access to a whole bunch of us. We have other content creators getting in the group. So if you have the content itch at some point, you can come pop up on these panels, pop on other guys' channels, network. And then a cool thing is we're talking about remote work. If you want to drive other members to the group, then we highly encourage you to do that. You get 50% commission on the monthly recurring revenue. So definitely great business model. We're just getting it off the ground. We would love to have you guys join us. If you need any help getting in there, we're going to start our call now, but reach out to any of us that have our Instagrams up there. And Chris, Amy, reach out to me too, and I gotta talk to you real quick, and then we will see you guys on the flip side. You guys have anything else to say before we wrap it?
All good.
I'm excited. In the group. MenofNow.us.
The last 20 minutes, so this is my remote.
I know. I found a massage gun last night, and Joel and the massage gun have been inseparable. So, guys, we'll see you in Men of Now, menofnow.us. Again, if you need help getting in there, you want to come in and check it out, reach out to any of us on our Instagrams up here on the panel. We're joining the call right now, but we'll definitely get you set up. So, see you there. Till next time.
All
Cheers.
Right.
Adios.